As ministry leaders, how can we move beyond the idea of soul rest to actually incorporating soul rest regularly in the rhythms of our life with Christ? In this episode, I'm joined by Curtis CZ Zackery. CZ has served as a church planter and pastor. He's written a number of books, devotionals, and other resources on the topic of soul rest. CZ is the founder of a gospel-centered ministry called Find Rest. Together, CZ and I look at digging beneath the surface level of Sabbath that many of us hold and really discovering the design and desires that God has for each of us to experience true soul rest and refreshment in our lives. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to another insightful episode of FrontStage BackStage. I am your host, Jason Daye, and each and every single week, I have the distinct privilege of sitting down with a trusted ministry leader, and we dive into a conversation, all in an effort to help you and pastors and ministry leaders just like you embrace a healthy, sustainable rhythm for both your life and ministry. And we are proud to be a part of the Pastor Serve Network. And along with every episode, our team creates an entire toolkit that you can use personally, that you can use with the ministry leaders at your local church to dig more deeply into the topic that we discuss. So be sure to check that out. That can be found at pastorserve.org/network. And you'll find a lot of resources in that toolkit, including a ministry leaders growth guide, which again, you can use with the ministry leaders of your local church. So be sure to check that out. Now, our team at Pastor Serve loves walking alongside of pastors and ministry leaders, and we are offering a complimentary coaching session. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can find information at pastorserve.org/free session. So be sure to check that out as well. And if you're joining us on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and take a moment to drop your name, the name of your church in the comments below. We absolutely love getting to know our audience better, and our team will be praying for you and for your ministry. Whether you're joining us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, please be sure to subscribe, to follow, so you do not miss out on any of these great conversations. I'm super excited about today. At this time, I would like to welcome Curtis Zackery. CZ, welcome to the show.
What's up? Excited to be with you.
Yeah, man, I'm thrilled that we have the opportunity to sit down and just kind of share, talk, and really we're going to be focusing in on this idea of soul rest, which obviously, CZ, it's always a gift when we have the opportunity to learn from others' stories, right? And you have written extensively on the topic of soul rest. You lead a ministry called Find Rest, right, at findrest.org. CZ, can you share with us what was going on really in your life, in your ministry, when you recognized your need as a ministry leader to find rest for your own soul?
Yeah, I think the nerve center would probably best begin when I had moved with my wife to the Bay Area of California. We were serving at a small church plant in a city called Richmond, which was just on the other side of the Bay Bridge from San Francisco. And the type of work that we were doing and the life that we got to live was really beautiful and meaningful and purposeful. We were walking alongside homeless friends who were looking for a place to live. We were helping folks who were transitioning from prison into civilian life. We had friends who were in recovery from addiction. It was just a really vibrant and alive time for our family. And even though the type of work that we were doing was good and beautiful and meaningful, I started to recognize within myself this level of fatigue that was rising on a day-to-day basis that I couldn't really figure out how to get to the bottom of. I didn't have a real sense of what the causal issues were, other than there was a lot going on, but it just felt like everything was so fulfilling. It didn't really have any place for me to be able to discover, okay, this is the thing that feels like an anomaly. But ultimately what it came down to was recognizing that in the midst of doing all of the type of work that I was doing, whether it was preparing sermons or leading a Bible study, or like I said, in any of those other conversations, there was no real sense of resolve. It
Mhm.
felt like there was just this continual ongoing conversation that never really had a landing place that allowed for any sort of respite. Even if there were days off, or if there were times where I could step away, my mind and my heart were always running in the background. And so I started to recognize that even though I was doing good work for God, I don't think I was doing that work with God. I think I
Mm.
had just discovered the ability to, with good intentions and with an umbrella of being under the call and the cause of the kingdom of God, how to just do ministry. And it caused me to stop asking the question, where do you want me to go? It caused me to stop desperately seeking for sustenance. And just to be matter of fact, I had good intentions, but yet was pouring out of an empty vessel. And the best way to really capsulize that season was a quote from Soren Kierkegaard. And he said, "It is absolutely unethical when one becomes so busy communicating that he forgets to be what he teaches." And I think that happens both intentionally for some, but in my case, I think inadvertently. I just had learned to do ministry such that it allowed for me to be able to live and function and perceptibly be okay, but really not have anything that produced flourishing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's helpful, CZ. And when you say that, I'm sure that lots of people watching and listening can resonate with
Mm,
that tie of that tension really of working for God versus working with God. Because in ministry, that is one of the easiest things to slip into, and you can kind of subtly slip into that. You're
yeah,
doing good things, right? But there becomes that disconnect between really doing things for God as opposed to with God. CZ,
yeah,
can you talk a little bit more? I'd like to press in on this a little bit.
sure, yeah,
Yeah, like how, what was that recognition for you? Because again, it can be a subtle thing, an inadvertent thing, as you said. What was that recognition for you that made you go, oh, wait a second. I need to move back to walking alongside of God instead of just doing things for the kingdom.
yeah. I think another quote that I can um, really relate with is from Henry Nouwen, who talked a lot about ministry and how ministry, quite frankly, can become an obstacle to relationship with God. Our elevation of our work for God becomes more important than the God we're working for. And one of the things that he said is, if we don't have a hidden life with God, our public life for God cannot bear fruit. And I think what's interesting about that quote to me is he didn't say, if we don't have a hidden life with God, we can't do ministry. As a matter of fact,
Mm,
we can do ministry. And quite frankly, we can do ministry perceptively very successfully. We can be preaching compelling sermons. We might be building beautiful ministry projects. We might be leading the charge of a staff that feels and seems to be vibrant. But at the same time, uh, creating work that ultimately isn't leading to transformation. I think that's the thing that began to feel very evident to me is I knew that there was work happening for God that was meaningful and purposeful and good, but I don't know that my life could be described as flourishing, that there would have been this picture of being fully alive as a result of my connection with Christ. And so, therefore, I could see the distinction. And when I was honest with myself and starting to see how, some of the indicators, maybe even in what you're asking, are, I found myself laughing less than I normally would. I found myself to be more serious than normal. I would pull away from people where normally I'd be more social, and these little indicators that might be different for different people started to be signal flares to say, well, maybe in the midst of all this God stuff that you're doing, there's something that's missing around the sustainability and health and strength, really, that would lead to not only continuing and being able to do it, but also in doing it, leading to transformation, to see people around me beginning to have an encounter with the power of God, and I think that distinction is really what it's all about.
Yeah. I love that point, CZ, about the fruitfulness of ministry. And here on the show, it's called FrontStage BackStage. And we call it that because, as you said, on the front stage, you can really look like things are happening. So ministry can happen, but it's not necessarily fruitfulness from that ministry, transformation from that ministry. Things can look good on the front stage and on the backstage of your life. If you don't have that hidden life, as Henry Nouwen said, with God, if you're not digging in on the backstage, then the front stage, can eventually all come tumbling down at some point. So I love that. CZ, for you, as you came to this recognition, right, as you shared, one of the key things that you write about and that you share is that you had this this realization that you need to experience rest for your soul. I mean, that's what came out of this. Like, you began to recognize these things, and you realize, wait, I need something to happen within me. Talk to us a bit about how that idea of rest for your soul was triggered, and why was that what you realized was what you were hungering for and what you actually needed in that time?
Yeah. So uh, during that season that I started out talking about, when that became an acute part of my conversation, we also had experienced loss through miscarriage a couple of times. And the second time was further along into the pregnancy. So we had to go to the emergency room at 2 a.m. in a city that was still relatively new to us. And I think the other component was, as we were walking through all of those things, we felt deathly alone. So the idea of what it looked like for us to experience what we were experiencing and then to share about that and process it really wasn't present for us. We didn't really have a communal connection that kind of fostered that. And that's partly because of my lack of intentionality in it that's now being exposed and revealed. But then also, even one of the things that I remember, and maybe people can relate to, is whenever I would find a small window of opportunity to feel like I could share what I was experiencing, I would have people say back to me, well, you're the guy that we normally would talk to when we're in trouble. So we're just going to give you some space and we're going to let you kind
All
of
right.
work it out on your own. And that was really hard, And so I remember going to a coffee shop, and I ordered my coffee, and I sat down, and I just put my head in my hands, and I just started to cry because I just felt so overwhelmed. I didn't really know what to turn to or how to even adjust my thinking, because I felt like, well, I'm doing everything that's right and good. I'm in church regular. I'm studying the Bible. There isn't any sense of disconnection between what I aspire to be true and what I feel like I desire in my heart. It's all these things. And so as I was sitting there, I felt like there was a lightning bolt, direct message from God to my heart, saying the thing that you alluded to, that you need rest for your soul. And sadly, I think two things were true in that moment. Number one, I knew it was directly from God. And I realized in that moment that I had no idea what that practically meant. Like, I knew it was right, but I didn't know how to find it or what it even consisted of. Then the second thing I realized, and this is kind of the indicator that led me down the path, was I knew God was speaking, but I also recognized in that moment it was the first time that I could clearly identify having heard from God in a really long time. And what was really sobering and sad about that is I was doing a whole lot of talking on behalf of God uh, during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just revealed to me in that moment, oh, this is what I think he's getting at, that there's this reservoir that is completely depleted. And it's not dealing with surface rest or a vacation or days away, but there is something that is deficient in my soul that I've allowed to become depleted. And so that was the recognition. And I think As far as how to find it, I could talk for hours about all of this, and that's where the idea of even writing about it came from. But just very quickly, the simplest way to describe it is in Matthew chapter 11. There's a famous verse that's usually quoted when we're going through stressful times or we're feeling anxious, and we kind of treat it again as a very surface level kind of discomfort. But when Jesus was talking and he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke, learn from me, gentle and lowly in heart." He goes on to say, "You'll find rest for your soul." He directly addresses where the deficiency is found. It's a soulish rest that is necessary. And what he was talking about was not circumstantial. It wasn't dealing with issues that they were encountering on a day-to-day basis. What he was saying is, you are trying to satisfy an eternal longing that has been placed in you from creation by things that are not meant to satisfy. And whether that's your pursuance of religion or righteousness before God or ministry work or fulfilling those things with sinful habits or whatever it is, he's saying, I will provide the rest your soul is craving and you're trying to fill with other things. So that's really what the whole idea is centered around.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love that as you share that experience in the coffee shop, we can all probably look back at those, deep God encounters over the course of our journey with God. Right. And one of the things that you said about that is that you knew God was speaking, but practically you didn't know like where to go or how to experience this soul rest. Like you knew this is what God was saying. This is what you needed. This is what your soul was hungering for, but kind of now what? So share with us a little bit, CZ. That was kind of a catalyst for you, obviously, right? Where did that journey take you then? How did you begin to discover, how to enter into soul rest? What did that look like for you? And then what did that propel you into as you move forward in ministry and in your life in Christ?
Yeah, it's so funny, having these conversations, like my mind goes all these different places. There's so many things I would love to say. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I knew after that time in the coffee shop that I needed to go chat with my bride and just let her know something's wrong. I don't know how to get to the bottom of what I'm experiencing and feeling, but I do feel like God is giving me a bead on where I need to walk toward. And so I went to the guys that I was serving with at that small church plant and basically said, I'm not sure what the next thing is, but I can't do this right now. I need to remember my first love. I need to figure out what does it look like for me to be operating from a place of connectedness to Christ. And I didn't even know if that consisted of me continuing in ministry ever again. I didn't know. So we packed up our stuff and we ended up moving to Sacramento with my wife's family. And they were so gracious and kind because they allowed me and us the space to stay with them, but then also to process. And I remember on the very first day of that new journey, waking up early. It was a beautiful California morning. The birds were chirping and I went outside and I just felt like it was fresh air. And then all of a sudden there was just this question that felt like it was plaguing me. It was a heavy question that said, now that I've taken away all the things that you get to do for me, will you love and worship me with the same passion? And sadly and very quickly, my answer was no. I knew it immediately. And what's interesting about that was he didn't say to me, do you love me? I would have said, yes, I love you, God. I love you. I want to know how to love you. But what he basically was saying is it the same for you with me when you're not doing things for me? Like, am I enough for you is really the question.
Right.
And what I realized when I was honest and in that moment by myself on this porch is like, man, it's just not enough. I've forgotten whatever it was that was the impetus to get me to even want to do any of these things. So to answer your question, it basically took me back to the beginning of the Bible. As somebody who loves the word and studying scripture, it's like, very humbling to say, well, I need to figure out what rest looks like biblically. So I just went back to Genesis and just said, all right, start noting every time I see rest pop up and see what that looks like. And thankfully, we all know as we study the Bible, it doesn't take long to bump into rest in the story of Scripture, But what was so game changing for me is in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2-3, on the seventh day of the creation account, it says that God rested from the work that he had done. And it says it 3 times in those 2 verses. God rested from the work that he had done. And it really just started racking my brain. I just started to think so many things that I had never thought about, having read this thing so many times,
Right.
probably preached about it at some point, But the first question that really just began to press on me was, why did God rest? God is omnipresent, omnipotent,
Right.
why would a God who has everything, all power, is everywhere all the time, like, why would he need to rest? And maybe that was a very kiddie question to ask, but it just was resting on my heart. Like, I couldn't shake it, And it was crazy. The Lord brought me to this verse in Exodus 31:17. And he talks about this idea of rest. And he says that this Sabbath, this resting, it says it's a sign forever between me and the people of Israel, that there would be this rest, that for 6 days, you work. But then he says, on the 7th day, God rested and was refreshed. And I'll tell you, like, I read that and I was like, well, I've read through the Bible.
Right.
I didn't see that. Like,
Yep.
seen it, I just skated past it. But I was like, wait, okay, I'd ask this question, why did God rest? Then it says there was something that was so refreshing that it could be refreshing to a God who has all power. Like, what could be so refreshing that it would bring him Like, he didn't just rest as a symbol. That's what I always thought. He was showing the people what to do. And then in Exodus 20, verse 8, when he gives the command, you will do what I showed you to do. 6 days you'll work, 7th day you'll remember my finished work. But what was refreshing that came from the rest? Well, I go back to that creation account. On the 7th day, he stopped. He looked back at everything he made by his own hand. Only he could do it. And everything he made by his hand, he said, man, I love it. I'm satisfied with it. It's good. It's finished. And he celebrates on that 7th day his finished work. So he is refreshed, looking back at the finished work that could only be done by his hand alone. So then when you fast forward to Exodus 28, what he was telling them was to do the exact same thing. Remember a work that could only be done by my hand alone. 6 days you do work that provides with your hand. 7th day you remember a work that I do. So that's beautiful. Well, then we can look at that and go, well, that's great. Old Testament, how does that apply to us today? Fast forward, Jesus bloody and beaten on a cross for sins that he didn't commit, to fulfill what is broken about humanity on our behalf. Right before he dies, he utters some familiar words. It is finished. Well, what is finished? It's a work that can only be done by the hand of God alone. And God looks back at this work that is done and he's satisfied. It's enough. And what comes after that significant work? There's rest. In the beginning, there was a rest that came acknowledging the work of God in his hand. Now in this New Testament understanding, the rest is exactly what Jesus was saying in Matthew 11. The rest is for our souls. Your soul is in turmoil, in upheaval, when you are striving and straining and doing it sustained on your own power. But when I finish the work, your soul finds rest. So how does that apply? Well, now all of a sudden, my identity, my worth, my value as a pastor, as a man, as a husband is not contingent upon what I do, but it is contingent upon who has done it on my behalf. And so now the rest comes from my soul. And then what's so amazing and most important to acknowledge is we don't just simply rest in that fact and then languish for the rest of our lives. No, we are propelled into the world, and that work that we do in the world is sustained by the finished work that we celebrate on the cross.
Yeah, that's so good, CZ. As we look at that rest, and being able to really find that rest, because that rest, as you said, is in the one who has completed the work through Christ Jesus, right? Oftentimes our tendency in ministry is to kind of recognize that and say, oh yeah. And then we get kind of back into it, right? We get back into the work, we get back into the stuff, we get back into, all the different hats that we're wearing, all different things. And we lose sight of, that refreshment, you know what I mean? Like we kind of tuck it away and then we get on with stuff. Yeah. So CZ, how have you found over the years that you've best been able to not slip into that temptation that probably all of us in ministry have, and that is to, get into it again, you know what I mean? And then we have to come every so often and be reminded, oh yeah, that's right. We have this rest for our soul. How have you been able to, continuously build that rhythm into your life? What has been most helpful for you?
Yeah, I think, again, there's so many things and ways to answer that question. I think most specifically, I'll just say there are 3 words that have been just so helpful to me in this journey. It's intentional, substantial, and sustainable. And those 3 words have become a helpful guide for me in a lot of different areas. But I'll just focus, directly on, maybe in a practical way to say, all right, well, clearly it's important for me to be practicing the spiritual rhythms or disciplines, however you would say it. And so I need to be studying the scriptures more. I need to be meditating, or so that would be an easy answer for me to say, of course, these are the ways that you can invite these experiences into your life as a ministry leader or pastor. But the thing that I started to realize is we're really good at what, we're not very good at why. And as ministry leaders, the first part of those 3 words is probably like breathing. It's so easy to be intentional. I'm going to read the Bible every day. I mean, weirdly and sadly, it's just part of our job to read the Bible. So like, if you say you read the Bible every day, it's like, it's not even that exceptional for the sake of, what it represents. But the real question isn't, do you read the Bible every day? The question is, why do you read the Bible every day? If I'm just going to say I'm going to read the Bible every day to do it, the only thing I'll get on the other side of it is whatever information I was trying to grab, or the ability to say, well, yeah, I did it. But the real question is, have I met God there? Like, did I have an encounter with him as I was entering into these spaces? The substantial piece is really where it kind of kicks up for me. So it's not just saying, I'm going to stop and make space. I'm going to make commitments to change some things. Because I think a lot of us can kind of do that, like you said, but we get swung back into the regular rhythm. The second part of it is intentionality, seeking a substantial return. Like, do I actually believe that the God of the universe will speak to me when I am meditating on him? Like, do I believe that the God of the universe will provide refreshment for me when I go on a nature walk or when I fast? Do I believe that the God of the universe will give me insight and wisdom by his Spirit? Like, do I believe, like, that's the thing that I think calls us to think about in Hebrews 11, this idea of faith or faithing, the hall of faith, as a lot of people call it. It wasn't just what they believed in their mind, but it was what they believed moving them to action forward. And so I think that that's the piece for some of us that can kind of, knock off some of the edges. And then that third piece is really simple. It's just sustainability. It's like, what can I do right now for the foreseeable future on a regular basis that allows me those intentional rhythms that can have a substantial connection with God? And so, really practically, like, one of the things for me that's changed my life is my phone. Like, this is my phone. And you're like, what the heck is that little rectangle, right? That's it right there. It is not a smartphone. That for me has been a dramatic shift that has changed so many things about my ability to remain in a sustainable posture. And some people would say, well, that's extreme, that's radical. Cool. I think what you need to do is determine, number one, what are the intentional steps necessary? But then two, what are the barriers that are keeping that intentional step from being a substantial connection with God?
Yeah, that's good. I think that the idea of identifying those barriers, because oftentimes, as you said, we can get the intentional part down. Yeah, we're in it, we're doing it. The why part we may struggle with, but we're being intentional. The substantial piece, I think, is really important. The expectation that God is going to do
Yeah.
something, that my
Yeah.
life will be different as I engage with God, right?
Yeah.
But that idea of identifying those barriers. Sometimes we're a little slower to do that, right? We're not as willing to say, okay, what's the flip side of the equation? What is actually hindering me? Um, not what do I need to do more of, but maybe what do I need to do less of, right? Or what
Yeah.
things do I need to move out of my life in order for me to be able to experience this ongoing, rest for my soul? That I might commune with God at a deeper level, that I might be more fruitful in my relationships, more fruitful in my ministry.
Yeah.
And those questions, CZ, when we wrestle through those questions, like what are the things we need to take out of our
Mhm.
lives? What are those distractions? Um, those can be more challenging
Yeah.
because we don't always like subtracting things. We don't live in a society that likes to subtract things.
Yeah, that's right.
So CZ, share with us just a little bit for you as you're processing through those things. What does that practically look like for you? Like whenever you recognize, hey, listen, I need to ditch the smartphone and go with a simple phone, right? Like,
Right.
like what was kind of the catalyst for you to be able to say, okay, wait a second, I recognize some things and I'm going to, you know, move those barriers out of my life?
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is how you stated that we don't like to subtract things. That's certainly a cultural normative.
Mhm.
But I would also go on to say we don't like to be introspective because we know that we don't really want to find the things that may be there when we start to look inward. And so I think it takes an element of either desperation or courage or some mixture of the two that gets you to finally be able to say, all right, I'm going to be honest with myself in how I spend my time. I'm going to be honest with myself and what's truly going on in my internal world. Um, you either are at the end of your rope and desperate for some sort of change, or you just are able to see, whether through other people's stories or reading or just understanding the importance, the need to be courageous to take that look. And I would just say there's a couple things that come to mind as important, different ways to go about it. But the first one, it's in Proverbs 28, talks about how those are blessed that identify sin and renounce sin. I just, uh, not to be elementary, but it's like, man, I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's important to take account of your internal world. And maybe one of the most obvious and glaring barriers to intimacy is just a sin issue that might be present in your life. And I think it's important to have regular rhythms of assessment, confession, and that proverb goes on. And Paul talks a lot about this idea of renouncing secret and shameful ways. Like, this is something that I think we can normalize, things that are part of our regular world that we can justify or kind of explain away as just a nagging habit or whatever. But I really think it's important for us to pay attention to sin issues that might be present. David talks about in Psalm 32 how his bones, he was wasting away in his bones.
Right.
I think some of us are experiencing unrest, honestly, because we either have unidentified sin stuff, trauma. Like, that was me. I needed to go through. So that was one big one. I think another one is, this is very practical, but it's what I call a time budget. I think you so easily can assume that you don't have enough time in order to get some time away to be able to find refreshment. Well, I got so much going on. And it's like, oh, that's cool. I'm not saying you're incorrect, but why don't you write down what you did the last 3 days? Here's schedules. Here's a slot for every hour. And it's like, as soon as you pull out that sheet, most people are like, yeah, I guess there was some more time there. I did probably,
Right.
It's like you don't even actually have to do the exercise. It's like just the thought of it. You're like, oh, okay, it's going to bring a sobriety around either just speaking in generality versus actually looking at where we spend our time. And the last thing I'll say is like, I think we give our lives to what we value. And it's one of those undeniable truths. It's not just, we could say we believe something all the time, but how we live is really going to be a reflection of what we believe. And so
Right.
I think that's really important to take account of.
Yeah, that's awesome, Susie. Man, this has been such a rich conversation, such a great conversation. And I thank you for your vulnerability, sharing your own story, your own, journey with God on all this. I think that's so encouraging to us. There's so many things that in ministry, other ministry leaders can resonate with from your story. And there's a lot of familiarity, I think, for many of us. CZ, you have, as I said, you've written extensively on this topic, published a couple different books. One, Finding Soul Rest, is actually a devotional, like a 40-day journey, powerful, absolutely powerful. Talk to us a little bit, CZ, if for those who are watching, listening in, are interested in connecting more with this idea of finding rest for our souls, very, very important thing. What are some of the resources to talk to us a little bit about your ministry? Talk to us a bit about how people could connect with you in what you're doing around this soul rest.
Yeah. So kind of starting there with what you were saying, I've done a little bit of writing about these things. The easiest way to attach to those books. So the publisher that I work with is also connected with a Bible software called Logos. And I think a lot of people might be familiar with that. So if you go to logos.com/CZ, you could probably easily grab resources there if you're interested in having more conversations around that. The YouVersion Bible app, which is pretty standard for a lot of people who have a smartphone. I do not, but the Bible app has reading plans in there. I have a Soul Rest reading plan. So if you just look up Soul Rest or my name, it'll pop up. I always suggest that because I'm a big proponent of, if there's a way to get stuff for free that can start the conversation, I think it's really helpful to have that. So that's a great 7-day start to maybe starting to stir this thing. Maybe do it with a couple of coworkers, or maybe like pastor friends, and just kind of have conversations around it. So I started a ministry called Find Rest, and the hope was to be a supplement to ministry leaders so that there would be sustainability and health. I know sometimes we have a hard time, maybe similar in my story, where you're experiencing some tension and you don't really have a place to process. And so I want to be that kind of resource for individuals, for teams, for churches. And so findrest.org is a way to do that. And I'll chat with anyone for free for an experience. I just would love to at least have a conversation to see where you're at, if I can be helpful, or if there's an ongoing way that I can be a resource to a team. So that's probably the best ways. I don't have social media, which is another conscientious choice that I've made more on the prescriptive side. But so that's probably the best way. CZ@findrest.org. Email me. I'd love to chat.
Awesome, brother. That's excellent. And we will have links to the YouVersion devotional. We'll have links to findrest.org, your ministry, and all those things in the toolkit for this episode. So those of you who are watching or listening along, or if you're, on the treadmill right now, can't jot all this down, you can check all it out at pastorserve.org/network, where you'll get resources that you can dig more deeply into this incredible conversation I've had today with CZ on finding rest for our souls. So appreciate you, brother. Appreciate your heart for the kingdom, your heart for those who are serving in the kingdom, and just a reminder, and the fact that you're willing not to just remind us about it, but you're willing to journey with us toward this idea of soul rest. It's a beautiful thing. So thank you for making the time, brother, to hang out with us on the show.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
All right. God bless you, my friend. Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, FrontStage BackStage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Daye, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.